Hey everyone, CWD Music Reviews here. I'm CWD and this is going to be a music review of the new Foxygen album, Hang. This is the fourth full-length album of experimental rock duo consisting of Sam France and Jonathan Rado, Foxygen. These guys have been around for a minute now. They've put out quite a few projects in the past, but they're best known for albums like Take the Kids Off Broadway and We Are the 21st Century Ambassadors of Peace and Magic. These album titles, I swear to God. And they're best known for this kind of throwback, old school-ish sound, namely experimenting with the genres of folk rock, glam rock, maybe some progressive rock. If you love David Bowie, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, some Queen, maybe some Bob Dylan, maybe some Byrds, you're definitely going to find something in Foxygen's discography that you're going to dig quite a bit. Now this album follows a bit of a snag for Foxygen, and by snag I mean a snag in which they tripped and fell off a cliff. I don't know what the hell and Star Power was supposed to be. It was like this double album of unfinished ideas or ideas that were like rushed and fleshed out this way, and it did not go all that well. And I don't know what the hell that song 24-Hour Lover Man was supposed to be. Don't ever listen to it, ever. And I guess they kind of broke up after that, or went under some kind of hiatus. I'm not completely sure. But the year 2014 and subsequently the beginning of 2015 was kind of a rough year for Foxygen, and up until the latter half of 2016 there was no activity from the duo whatsoever. But they decided to come back and start dropping new music. A few singles have surfaced for this new album, and now we have this new album out on Jaguar, their first album in about 3 years, almost 3 years. I've enjoyed albums of theirs in the past. Definitely We Are the 21st Century Ambassadors of Peace and Magic. I'm going to screw that album title up a lot. But simultaneously, I'm not that fond of Star Power. I'm most certainly not fond of that one song they dropped after that. That sounds like ass. Again, don't listen to it. So in one breath, I had quite a bit of optimism for this album. But in another breath, I was kind of scared. Like, very scared. So with that in mind, I decided to give this album a listen, and I gotta say, guys, Foxygen, they're back. While this album isn't completely fantastic, it's definitely really good. This album's about 8 tracks in length. It's 32 minutes long, so it's brief. It's really brief. A bit too brief, if you ask me. I think that's one of the few complaints I have for this particular album. If you're going to come back after a while, you're going to need to bring to the table more than just 32 minutes of songs. But the time they did bring more than just 30 or 40 minutes worth of songs, it was leading to End Star Power, so touche there, my friend. And what they're doing here, it's not vastly different from what they were doing with the other records before, namely 21st Century Ambassadors of Peace and Magic. It's just bigger, grandiose, and very, very orchestral. Amongst the collaborators here, we have Stephen Dross of the Flaming Lips. I guess he's contributing drums. I haven't fully looked at the liner notes yet. A 40-piece orchestra. And no single bit of the piece of the orchestra is wasted here. And it definitely shows. Take the opening track, for example, Follow the Leader. You can hear pretty much every piece of instrumentation taking place on this track, as well as every track here. The track opens up with some nice little groovy bass. There's some jazz organ here. I do like the tastefully added background vocals. I love the little horn refrains that are on the track. Follow the leader. There's some light castanet in the background, and the strings. I love those strings. They add to a lot of density and thickness to this track and a myriad of tracks here. Sam's vocals, if you're not in the know, he really does sound like an interesting amalgamation of every eccentric or fantastic vocalist that was present in the 60s and the 70s. Namely, Freddie Mercury, Mick Jagger. You can hear a lot of Mick Jagger in this guy's voice. maybe some Iggy Pop, Lou Reed, David Bowie, bits and pieces of all four Beatles. He's this mutant. He's this amalgamation of all of his influences vocally, and it adds a lot of, I guess, androgyny and idiosyncrasy to Foxygen's sound. Like on the track Mrs. Adams, on the opening he sounds a lot like Lou Reed, and I swear to God I almost thought it was him, but after a while more Jagger, more Bowie starts coming in, and it's particularly interesting. What's also interesting about this track is how there's these driving staccato rhythms that pop up in the beginning. I do like how this particular sound is prominently winds and horns, and of course plenty of strings. I mean, each track has its own layers of string and it's well executed. I love how indulgently it builds at random moments of the track. It adds a lot of layer and density and thickness to it, especially on this track. Damn. Where was Foxygen during and Star Power when songs like these are being made? I would have minded a longer than hour-long album from Foxygen if they were making songs this good, as well as songs that are as good as Avalon, which has these really groovy honky-tonk type piano opening up the track, as well as random accelerando moments with some arpeggiated guitar, as well as when the guitar glides into a more classical sound that is particularly dynamic and intricate in its own right. This track in particular sounds like a weird hybrid of something off of Aladdin Sane by David Bowie, as well as something off of Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. I do like the saxophone solo that's on the tail end of this track. Definitely keeps me in the moment, certainly. But I think my favorite track on the entire album has to be America. It starts off dreary and only gets drearier over time, but it's juxtaposed by the dramatic atmosphere, the orchestral feel to this track, as well as many tracks here. There's just something about how this kind of bright-ish and dramatic instrumentation, coupled with Sam's vocal delivery and his lyricism all throughout the track, that really brings dark and light together in like this weird blend that somehow works. The same can be said about a good chunk of the tracks on the album, like Mrs. Adams, and I guess Trauma to an extent, even though that's my least favorite track on the record. As far as America goes, this track's insane. At a certain moment, there's like this trading of this do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do rhythm from some harpsichord piano before it's repeated by this crazy and erratic horn drum amalgamation that is particularly fantastic. I love how it then enters in the more dramatic and kind of mid-paced atmosphere, and it houses like my favorite line on the entire album: "Our heroes aren't brave, they just have nothing to lose." On the latter half, there's also some more swing-driven moments that is particularly off-kilter in its own right. I like the little wood block that's added on the background of this moment. If you listen to any track on the album, like if you just hate Foxygen for whatever reason and you had to only listen to one track off of a new album of theirs, listen to America. You'll want to listen to the whole thing. So, as far as the first half of the album goes, flawless. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing bad I can conceivably say about the track. The second half, not bad either, but not exactly flawless. And it comes in the form of a triage of tracks that either are just underdeveloped or just go absolutely nowhere. On the former note, you have On Lancashire, which I do like quite a bit. It has this weird alternative country vibe on the first half with this nice steel pedal guitar, as well as this nice syncopation of background vocals and Sam's own vocals that kind of are in a country-ish, roots rock-ish type thing that probably could have been off of the Rolling Stones' Sticky Fingers. But this moment, weirdly enough, is like abandoned after the first half, and it just goes into a more driving and build-driven sound that was already established on the first half, albeit a sound that I like. And you get the track Upon a Hill, which is brief. It is way too brief for its own good. Even if I dig the driving folk punk-ish rhythm that's on the latter half of the track, Sam glides over this particularly well, vocally. And then you get my least favorite track, Trauma, which is fine somewhat. I mean, it's got a nice little soul rhythm to it and some nice hulking horns, and the build's okay. But the lyrics are a bit general for its own good, and the instrumental itself doesn't really go much of anywhere throughout the course of the close to 5 minutes it runs. I'm not sure what it is they were going for here, and I'm not sure Foxygen knew either, but this isn't really a necessary track for the album. But on the bright side, it closes off with one of the best tracks of the album, Rise Up. Damn, this track is beautiful, it's bombastic. The strings and the horns here are particularly dense, and I love all the intricate rhythm changes that are on here. And I love how just straight dramatic and straight climactic the latter half of the track is. It doesn't feel like it's 5 minutes long, and that's a positive I can say about a good many tracks on the album. These tracks here, most of them are over 4 minutes, and for the most part, with the exception of Trauma, they don't drag, they don't waste your time, they don't do anything that's just outright redundant or just, you know, bad. So overall, I dig this new Foxygen album quite a bit. I think that they have finally redeemed themselves in the eyes of people like me that really didn't like and Star Power. I think that they are back stylistically. I think they are a force that you really need to pay attention to in the form of indie rock, indie folk, folk punk, and even glam, even baroque pop. If you're a fan of like any of those genres or any of the artists previously I mentioned, like Bowie, like the Rolling Stones, then you're definitely going to want to check this out because there's definitely something in it for you. I do wish the tracks were longer or maybe had more tracks to it, because the second half is full of tracks that, while not necessarily horrible, they could have definitely gone into a bit more meticulous direction like the first half did. Even with that in mind, it definitely has me excited for what Foxygen are going to do next, and I'm particularly pleased with the results of this project. This album is a plus 2.2 out of plus 3. Definitely going to be a highlight for the month and will most likely enter my end of the year list. But if you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? What was your reasoning for that, and what should I consider listening to and reviewing next? This is CWD Music Reviews here, signing off.